handled it with different levels of severity in their response. But the very fact that both companies, who obviously don't think they should be classified as publishers, decided to censor a post by a publisher who faces the rules and regulations that publishers do, does that highlight very clearly that the current rules and regulations and the way that they apply can't be sustainable forevermore?
Well, it points to the reluctance of these companies historically to act as referees of their own platforms. We've now seen what happens when they don't act as referees. I don't think that's an outcome that a lot of people want. And now we're seeing what happens when they start to wade in more proactively and really take steps to avoid the kind of widespread disinformation campaigns that we saw in 2016.
But the very fact that they're doing that or having to do that, whether that's the right move by them or not, does it not show that they are in some ways publishers and that they should therefore be regulated as such?
Well, I would just say that they've always had this control. They've always had editorial control over what goes on their sites. This is not some new thing. It's just that they didn't exercise that control in visible ways. They did it through algorithms and they buried it in product changes. Now they're doing it much more overtly. And I think that that's probably clarifying the power that they've had all along. And as far as the regulation, I think that the thing that a lot of critics of these platforms don't understand is if you did strip away Section 230 or some of the other legal protections that they have, what you'd end up with is platforms with a lot more censorship, not less.
Yeah, I don't know that people necessarily realize that when they call for eliminating Section 230. Kevin, I know you're not a stock guy, but it just strikes me that we're down 400 points on the Dow. Twitter's barely lower. Facebook is down less than 2%, cutting a tiny slice off of its, 30% rally so far this year. Wall Street does not get fazed by these threats from both parties. Why do you think that is? What do you think the solution ultimately is here? And do you think Wall Street is right not to be worried about the business model?
I think Wall Street is probably right to be skeptical of this talk about repealing Section 230. I don't think that's likely to happen under a Trump administration or a Democratic administration, frankly, even though it is the stated preference of both parties right now. But I think that the market is sort of maybe writing that off correctly as probably more of a talking point than an actual strategy that's likely to be deployed.
The whole debate, Kevin, over the last week or two on the New York Post story and suppressing it, was it successful, or did it lead to, in fact, it getting even more coverage and prominence on these platforms?
I think there's an argument to be made that it gave it more coverage, that there's a kind of Streisand effect where you try to sort of cover something up and it ends up becoming a bigger story. But I also think that the early action of these companies is ultimately better than if they had done nothing and then had to sort of scramble to catch up. I mean, what we saw in 2016 was that these platforms waited to act until it was too late to sort of contain this disinformation. Now we're seeing maybe they acted too early or they were too aggressive, but I think most people would still prefer that to a world in which they did nothing at all.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.